first artificial satellite that was put into orbit was the all-important Sputnik 1, that did the revolutionary act of orbiting the Earth and having a consistent radio beep that pissed off the Americans. Sputnik was launched into a low elliptical orbit and did not do much but really circle the Earth and beep. It's not so much about what this machine did directly, it was more about what this ball of metal meant for society, and, well, the Cold War at large. The launching of this beep machine was the start of the space race, and it also jump-started the American space program. Their first satellite was the Explorer 1. It carried a number of different equipment that would measure cosmic rays among other experiments. This was actually the first craft to detect the Van Allen belts. Perhaps we will talk about those in a future episode. So far we have talked about the Soviet Union and the US, though there were other countries that got in on the space race and felt that they had to put their stamp on the great expanse of space. The first satellite that was not from the two superpowers comes from a surprising place. Some people will tell you that it was the British with the Ariel 1, also known as the UK-1 or S-55. This satellite was built in a joint effort by NASA and the SERC. It was operated by the British, though it was not the first satellite operated and built totally independent of another state. That honor goes to the Alouette 1. Now, with a name like that, you might be thinking it comes from France. You'd be wrong. It is actually Canada that had the honor of the first independently built artificial satellite, though it was not launched independently. On the 29th of September, 1962, this weird-looking potato bot was launched, marking Canada's entrance into the space age and the space race. The satellite was designed to conduct 4 experiments. These tests were to measure the electron density distribution of the ionosphere. The other experiments include energetic particle detectors that contain Geiger counters and scintillators, a VLF receiver for measuring both artificial and natural VLF signals, and to measure cosmic radio noise. Unlike many later satellites, it did not contain a tape recorder that allowed it to store data and can only transmit its collected data when in range of a receiving station. The design and construction period was a labor-intensive one. The group that built the unit was designated DRTE. The DRTE started working on the satellite when NASA sent out a call for international collaboration in the construction of satellites. Alouette 1 was in development for 3.5 years. This time includes the design and construction. Once the unit was complete, it was flown to the California launch site and fired from the Pacific Missile Range. The satellite was launched on a Thor DM-21 Agena B. The Thor designation was for the first rocket stages that would carry the craft and its cargo to an excess of 18,000 kilometers an hour. That swiftly put the craft into an almost perfect 1,000-kilometer orbit. The launch weight of the Alouette 1 was 145.6 kilos. Before the launch of Alouette 1, the ionosphere had never been studied up close or in depth. The Canadian government was also tasked with studying the ionosphere for years to come. On November 29, 1965, the backup unit for Alouette 1 was readied and launched from the Pacific Missile Range as Alouette 2. The units gave the first measurements of the ionosphere that would be important for future research and experiments. Alouette 1 had a successful mission run, though it was not revolutionary in its design or implementation. The satellite was only meant to be in service for a single year, but stretched into an unprecedented 10. After the successful run of the mission, it was switched off on September 30th, 1972. Now, interestingly enough, the satellite is still in orbit. According to Life magazine, the unit should remain in orbit for the next 1,000 years. So remember, next time you look upon the night sky, you may just see a piece of very old but very fascinating pieces of Canadian history floating around.